My name is Evelyn Carter. I was 48 years old and had worked as a senior oncology nurse at St. Matthew Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio, for nearly 23 years. Ironically, after spending most of my adult life helping cancer patients prepare for difficult conversations, I found myself sitting on the opposite side of the desk at exactly 9:40 a.m. on March 18, 2025. My oncologist quietly confirmed what the biopsy already suggested: Stage 3 ovarian cancer. My younger sister, Hannah, had taken unpaid leave from her elementary school teaching job without telling me. She spent 3 days reorganizing my medications, appointments, and insurance paperwork before I even returned home. She placed my favorite blue ceramic teacup on the kitchen counter every morning because she said routines made frightening days feel smaller. For months later, at precisely 7:16 p.m., that same teacup sat beside a rewritten inheritance while my husband stared silently across the dining room. What I didn't understand that evening was that the inheritance wasn't created because I believed I was dying. It was rewritten because I finally understood how I had been living. For nearly 24 years, our family quietly revolved around invisible rankings that nobody admitted existed. My husband, Daniel, always occupied the highest position without asking for it outright. His work schedule mattered more than everyone else's. His preferences determined where holidays were celebrated. Even simple dinners somehow became centered around what he wanted. Looking back, I realized the blue ceramic teacup had become my own silent symbol of peace. Every Sunday morning, before anyone else woke up, I poured Earl Grey into that cup and enjoyed 15 uninterrupted minutes by the kitchen window. It reminded me that calm could exist, even inside busy lives. Hannah understood the ritual better than anyone. Whenever she visited, she would quietly wash the teacup herself before leaving, placing it exactly where I expected to find it the next morning. She never announced these little acts of kindness. She simply noticed what made other people feel safe. The uncomfortable truth is that I helped create the environment that eventually hurt me. Whenever Daniel interrupted Hannah during family dinners, I changed the subject instead of correcting him. When he forgot birthdays, I reminded everyone how stressful his job in commercial real estate had become. When he skipped family gatherings because another networking event appeared, I defended him before anyone asked. I convinced myself that protecting peace required protecting his comfort first. The cancer diagnosis only magnified those habits. Within 48 hours, Daniel volunteered to manage our finances during treatment. He insisted on attending meetings with our accountant. At my request, our estate attorney, Melissa Grant, scheduled an appointment for April 2nd to review my existing inheritance documents. Daniel confirmed the appointment by email, replied again through text message the following afternoon, and even mentioned it during dinner while Hannah sat beside us. There would never be any question later about whether he knew my wishes. Everything had been discussed clearly, calmly, and repeatedly. As we left the attorney's office that afternoon, Daniel squeezed my shoulder with practiced reassurance. "Don't make everything so dramatic," he said with a small laugh. "You're going to beat this." Everyone smiled politely. For reasons I couldn't explain then, those 6 words stayed with me much longer than his promise ever did. The first chemotherapy session was scheduled for Monday, April 14th. Hannah drove me because Daniel claimed an important client meeting had been arranged months earlier. I believed him without hesitation. After all, I had spent 2 decades explaining to patients that treatment was a marathon, not a single appointment. Missing one morning together didn't automatically mean someone loved you less. At 6:42 p.m. that evening, I returned home exhausted. Hannah had prepared chicken soup, placed fresh flowers beside the kitchen window, and, as always, set my blue ceramic teacup exactly where I expected it. The house was unusually quiet. Daniel texted that he would be home around 9 because the client dinner had gone longer than expected. At exactly 7:18 p.m., my phone vibrated. The notification came from an unfamiliar number. "I don't know you personally, but I think you deserve the truth." Below the message were 4 photographs. The first showed Daniel sitting across from a woman in a downtown restaurant I recognized immediately. The second captured them holding hands outside the entrance. The third showed them kissing beside his black BMW. The fourth image carried a timestamp from the previous weekend, when he had told me he was attending a real estate conference in Cincinnati. For nearly 30 seconds, I simply stared. The blue teacup sat inches from my hand, still releasing thin curls of steam. Beside it rested the folder labeled Estate Planning, Carter Family. Hannah had organized every page that afternoon while I slept after treatment. Months of careful preparation filled one side of the table. On my phone rested the complete collapse of the marriage those plans had assumed would last forever. I called Daniel immediately. He answered on the third ring. "I've seen the pictures," I said quietly. There was a long pause. Then he sighed, as though I had interrupted something inconvenient. "Evelyn," he replied, "don't make everything so dramatic." The sentence landed harder than the photographs themselves. I ended the call without another word. Hannah walked into the kitchen carrying folded laundry. She noticed my face before she noticed the phone. I handed it to her without speaking. She looked through every photograph carefully. When she finished, she placed the phone face down on the counter instead of throwing it or shouting. Then she picked up my blue ceramic teacup before it could tip over in my shaking hand. "You should drink your tea before it gets cold," she said softly. That quiet sentence broke something inside me far more completely than any argument could have. As I sat there, memories began arranging themselves into a pattern I could no longer ignore. The unexplained business trips. The passwords he suddenly changed. The anniversary dinner he canceled because of an emergency meeting. The expensive watch that wasn't purchased with any credit card I could find. Every tiny moment I had dismissed suddenly fit together like pieces of a puzzle I had refused to solve. I had been betrayed. But if I was completely honest, I had also participated in my own blindness. I hadn't only ignored warning signs. I had defended them. And for the first time since my diagnosis, I realized the disease threatening my future wasn't the only thing quietly growing inside my life. The next morning, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation I simply couldn't see. 24 years of marriage deserved at least one honest conversation before I made any permanent decisions. But before speaking to Daniel again, I reached out to two people I believed would help me think clearly. The first was my mother. She listened in complete silence while I explained everything, including the photographs and Daniel's admission by omission. When I finished, she took a slow breath and said, "Evelyn, you're fighting cancer. This isn't the time to make your marriage another battle. Men make mistakes. Don't make it a thing." I thanked her, ended the call, and stared at the kitchen window for several minutes. An hour later, I called Daniel's older brother, Michael. We'd always been close, and I hoped he would encourage Daniel to take responsibility. Instead, he sighed. "My brother is under pressure," he said. "You know how stressful his business has been. Besides, if this becomes public, everyone loses. Try to think about the family. Everyone loses." The phrase echoed in my head. It seemed that everyone was worried about protecting the family's image, yet no one seemed concerned about protecting the person sitting through chemotherapy while discovering her husband had another life. That afternoon, I kept my appointment with Melissa Grant, our estate attorney. I almost canceled it, but something inside me insisted I go. Melissa welcomed me into her office exactly as she always had. She reviewed my medical documents first, then quietly asked whether anything significant had changed since our previous meeting. I hesitated for only a second. Then I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. She didn't minimize it. She didn't defend Daniel. When I finally stopped talking, she folded her hands on the desk and looked directly at me. "Evelyn," she said calmly, "you don't need anyone's permission to protect your future." Those 11 words felt heavier than every conversation I'd had during the previous 24 hours. For the first time since my diagnosis, someone wasn't asking me to endure more. She was reminding me that I still had choices. That evening, I asked Daniel to come home early. He arrived at 6:05 p.m., loosened his tie, and acted as though nothing unusual had happened. I placed the printed photographs on the dining room table between us. "I'm not interested in screaming," I told him. "I'm giving you one opportunity to tell me the complete truth. If the affair is over, if you're willing to be honest, We can separate the marriage from my medical treatment and handle both with dignity." He barely looked at the photographs. Instead, he leaned back in his chair. "You're overreacting," he said. "Don't make everything so dramatic." Then his expression hardened. "If you start telling people these stories, they'll think the chemotherapy is affecting your judgment. You'll destroy this family, embarrass yourself, and you'll regret it. Think very carefully before you start a fight you can't win." In that moment, I finally understood something that cancer had never taught me. The person sitting across from me wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing what I still owned. That night, after Daniel went upstairs, I opened my phone and typed the first message that came to mind. "You lied to a woman fighting cancer. I hope every dollar is worth what you destroyed." I stared at it for several seconds before deleting every word. The second draft was even harsher. "By the time your girlfriend realizes what kind of man you are, my lawyer will already have finished what I started." That one disappeared too. Neither message would change who he was. Instead, at 9:14 p.m., I sent only one sentence. "Beginning tomorrow, all communication regarding our finances and estate will go through Melissa Grant. I wish you good health, but I no longer trust you with my future." His reply arrived less than 2 minutes later. "Do whatever makes you feel better." For the first time in months, I felt strangely calm. 2 weeks later, Melissa finalized the new inheritance. Daniel, who had once been the primary beneficiary of nearly everything I owned, was removed from every major decision. My retirement savings, life insurance, and the family home were placed into a carefully structured trust. Hannah became executor, not because she had asked for anything, but because she had quietly proven, every single day, what loyalty actually looked like. A portion of the estate was also designated to the Patient Assistance Fund at St. Matthew Medical Center, where I had spent 23 years helping strangers through the same diagnosis I now carried myself. Word spread through the family faster than I expected. Some relatives called me cold. Others accused me of acting out of revenge. They misunderstood completely. Revenge would have been trying to ruin Daniel. I simply stopped rewarding him. 3 months later, after the divorce proceedings had begun, Daniel appeared unexpectedly outside my house carrying flowers I knew I would never place in water. Hannah opened the door. I asked her to let him wait on the front porch for 15 minutes while I finished my tea in the blue ceramic teacup that had survived everything else. For once, he waited. When I finally invited him inside, the confidence he usually carried had disappeared. He apologized. Not perfectly. Not completely, but more honestly than I had ever heard before. Then he asked one quiet question. "Was there any point where I could have fixed this?" I answered just as quietly. "There still is, but it isn't about me." I told him the only thing I wanted from him was a sincere apology to Hannah for dismissing her kindness, her sacrifices, and the years she spent supporting both of us while asking for nothing in return. The conversation that followed between the two of them happened privately in the living room. I never listened at the door, and I never asked either of them to repeat every word. Some moments are too personal to become evidence. Nearly a year has passed since my diagnosis. My latest scan showed no new disease progression. Every Sunday morning, Hannah still joins me for tea. Sometimes Daniel comes too. He brings fresh tea leaves instead of expensive gifts now. He sits at the same table as everyone else, not above anyone, not below anyone. Just another person earning trust one ordinary week at a time. The blue ceramic teacup still rests beside the kitchen window. It reminds me that inheritance is never just about money. Mine was rewritten at 9:14 p.m. after a stage 3 diagnosis, 24 years of marriage, and one impossible decision, but the most valuable thing I chose to leave behind was this. Never leave your future to someone who treated your love like it was already theirs.